Srila Prabhupada wrote this on the Jalaputa before arriving in America on his first journey to the West on the order of his spiritual master. And this poem, with Prabhupada's authorization, was given a melody, and devotees. I remember when I first heard this, it's in the 1970s, I can't remember what year. A devotee, his name was Jai Sachimananda. Prabhupada said he was a Western devotee. Prabhupada said he was a Bengali in his last life. Huh?
You say that from his pronunciation too.
Yes. So he asked Prabhupada if it's okay to put this to a melody. And then it was recorded. The devotees used to listen to it a lot. And I know I did. Not just for the melody, obviously for Prabhupada's feelings of compassion, which is so distinctly expressed here in this poem. We obviously know the history about Prabhupada's instructions and his feelings of helplessness and dependence, complete dependence for impacting and impregnating Krishna consciousness in the hearts of the people of the West. He didn't know what to expect, and this song clearly describes what Prabhupada's thoughts while on passage in the Jaladuta before landing in America. I'm not sure, I think the devotees, they chant this also for the festival in Boston. I haven't been to one yet. They've been having the Prabhupada Arrival Festival in Boston, I don't know how many years, but it's always the same time as the Ukraine Festival. So I'm always in Ukraine at that time of the year, but I'm pretty sure that if it's not sung, it's at least read. Again, to capture Prabhupada's mood. Any devotee who's been given an order, or not only given the order, but who's taken up Lord Chaitanya's order. Lord Chaitanya's order, as Prabhupada would so oftentimes quote, Yarideka Tarikara Krishna Upadesha Maragaya Burhan Desh. He was always emphasizing that Lord Chaitanya has given this order to everyone to preach Krishna consciousness and to give Krishna consciousness to others, and to feel compassion, jividoi, feel compassion for the sufferings of others. The other night in Boston, we were speaking a little bit about what is compassion. In compassion, we oftentimes say, we offer our obeisances to devotees of the Lord who are like wish-fulfilling desire trees, and they are always full of compassion for the fallen, suffering souls. And compassion means is that if one sees others suffering, then he, Bhadadukka Dukhi, as Prabhupada would oftentimes describe, the characteristic of a Vaishnava is that if he sees others suffering, then the suffering he feels is what he sees in others. For the Vaishnava is one who's always fully dependent upon Krishna, and the suffering is always minimized by the grace of the Lord. And even sometimes, as described in Chaitanya Bhagavata, even if we may see a Vaishnava suffering, we should know that it's not really suffering, it's just appears that way to be suffering. But there's a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Madashriya Kata Mishta Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Devividhastapan Haitaman Gachatetasa. Those Vaishnavas, those devotees who engage constantly in hearing and chanting about me, do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with my thoughts and my activities, my pastimes in this world. So Vaishnava, he even accepts any reversals, any apparent suffering in his life as an opportunity to remember the Lord. And it deepens his attachment to the Lord, it deepens his affection. And as we gave an example last night, we were speaking about one God brother, how it increased even his gratitude for, because certainly those who are Vaishnavas, when they're put in difficult situations, they remember the Lord. Queen Kunti, she prayers, let those calamities happen to me again and again, so that we can see you again. For seeing you means we no longer have to see birth and death in this material world. This is how Queen Kunti is praying to Krishna. She's praying, we may not be so advanced to pray for calamities. But Queen Kunti, she demonstrated that when the difficulties are there, I remember you. And Tatenu Kampam Sushamikshama Bhujana Evat Kritam Vakam Yes. One who seeks your compassion and thus tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions due to the karma of his past misdeeds, who always offers his obeisances to you and always glorifies you with his body, mind, and words, he certainly becomes a bona fide candidate for liberation. This is how a Vaishnava feels. He sees that any suffering, any calamities, any difficulties that come, he sees them as an opportunity to remember the Lord and deepen his attachment and dependence upon the Lord. And he never blames the Lord for his sufferings, but he understands that whatever suffering that comes my way is simply due to my past misdeeds, and therefore let me accept them. Let me accept them, but let me always remember you. So, a Vaishnava who thinks in this way and tolerates all kinds of inconvenience and difficulties and never blames others. In fact, I always quote the verse, another nice verse, which describes the characteristics. Taraskrita vipalabdak shaptakshipta hacharapi nasitatpatu kurvanti tadbhakta kavayopihi. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even if they are cheated, cursed, insulted, neglected, disturbed, or even killed, they're never inclined to avenge themselves. That's a characteristic of a Vaishnava. He sees, because he's so fully dependent on Krishna, he thinks that anything that happens to me, I should not blame others to be the perpetrator of my suffering. He thinks that it is due to my own past misdeeds that I'm suffering now. Let me accept that, because there's always going to be some inconvenience in this world. Let me accept it as the will of his arrangement of the Lord. And by his meditation in this way, the Lord helps that devotee from within. He helps that devotee, and he actually, although physically there may be suffering, his mind is peaceful because he sees Krishna. And wherever there is remembrance of Krishna, Bhaja Hure Manashi Nanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Vindare. My dear mind mind, please meditate upon the divine son of Nanda Maharaj, because by meditation upon him, one becomes fearless. The devotee can be fearless in the face of adversity because he sees that Krishna, I'm always under Krishna's protection. It may look, well, sometimes people ask, how is it we see Vaishnavas dying, Vaishnavas getting sick, diseased? Says, how can we understand that Krishna is protecting one in these circumstances? But actually, real protection means that the ability to remember Krishna in all circumstances. That is real protection. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement in this path protects one from the most dangerous type of fear. And what is the most dangerous type of fear? To forget Krishna. That is most dangerous. And this material world is always a place of upheavals and calamities. And therefore, Vaishnava is always praying to the Lord, let me remember you constantly, let me never forget you, let me simply serve you with my body, mind and words. And we see that such Vaishnavas, as Srila Prabhupada we're talking about his compassion and his feelings of devotion and the difficulties he underwent. He suffered 2 heart attacks on the Jaladutta on his way to America. So when he suffered 2 heart attacks, he may think, as soon as I get to America, I should get to a hospital, have an electrocardiogram done, immediately get everything checked up, make sure I didn't do that. Had 2 heart attacks in the Jaladutta, but what did he do when he got to America? He just simply began a mission that was given to him by a spiritual master. So someone may say, how is it? How Prabhupada suffered 2 heart attacks? But the devotee just sees that there's no obstacles in devotional service. There are no obstacles. The physical body is always going to be a source of distress. But a devotee, matra spashastu konteya sitoshna sukha dukkada agamopayano nichastam satiksha subharata. He knows that the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception and one has to tolerate them without being disturbed. I remember this was the very first verse I learned. Very first verse. And when I learned it on the streets of Providence, Rhode Island, on the same day that I was sent out to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. It's the day I shaved my head. I moved into the temple, and then when I moved into the temple president had a strict policy that anybody who moved into the temple had to sleep in the basement on the concrete floor to show that he was sincere. So I slept in the basement for quite some time. I can't remember, it was a few weeks. And then when I was finally allowed to come upstairs, I asked them, can I shave my head? And they said, no, don't move so quickly. And then finally the day when they shaved my head, I said that my head was all shaved and I had very long hair. And there was no such thing as electric buzzers in those days. The temple couldn't afford something like that. That was opulence. It was just one of those hand clippers. They used the hand clippers and then a razor that looked like it'd been in the battlefield. By the time he finished the razor, I came downstairs, and they said, here's your book bag. They took me out, and they drove me to Providence, Rhode Island. They dropped me off in the middle of the street in downtown Providence, Rhode Island, with a Boston Globe newspaper bag and with some reservoir of pleasures. And here I was looking like, I don't know what I looked like. My head was still cut in many places, approaching people. So I decided to learn this verse, Matra Spashas Tukotila. Sikoshna Tukadukada. It's my first verse. So I spent a little time sitting down memorizing that verse, and then I stood up again and tried to approach people. But it's non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and the disappearance in due course of like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, and one has to learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, anyways, as we were saying, there'll always be difficulties, and but to the degree that we can remember Krishna and accept Krishna's will, just like it was explained by a nice example on Dharma the bull, in which the Bhagavata was beaten by personality of Kali. When Parikshit Maharaj came to Dharma and asked, who has perpetrated the suffering upon you? 3 of Dharma's legs had been broken by Kali, personality of Kali. Dharma's response was, how can I recognize or point to the perpetrator of my suffering? Because nothing can happen without the will of the Lord. Therefore, if I point to the perpetrator of my suffering, I'm just as much as guilty as the perpetrator himself. So Dharma would not declare to Parikshit Maharaj, who was the protector of religious principles, which is the responsibility of the king. He would not declare to Parikshit Maharaj who caused this suffering upon him. And Parikshit Maharaj immediately understand, because he's the protector of religious principles, that you must be religiosity personified. And he understood that it was his responsibility to find that person who was responsible for causing the suffering. But Dharma was thinking, no, nothing happens without Krishna's will. If I blame somebody else for my suffering, I'm just as responsible as the person who apparently caused it. So I will not. Never sees it and blames others. Knows that when I'm suffering now, then due to my own past misdeeds. And then, when he accepts that, then the Lord helps from within to eradicate. Although pain may be there, anxiety may be there, but gradually the devotee remembers the Lord and the mind becomes peaceful, because Krishna's hand is there. And if Krishna is somehow involved, then if Krishna is there, then I know it's for my benefit. Let me accept it. And the mind will become peaceful. Krishna Bhakti Nishkama Atayeva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sapana Shanta. The devotee of Lord Krishna, he's Nishkama, he has no desires, material desires that he wants fulfilled, and therefore he can be peaceful, whereas those who desire bhukti, material opulence, mukti, liberation from suffering, siddhi, mystic yoga perfections, because they still have some desire that they want separate from Krishna's pleasure, therefore they are described to be kami. They still have lusty desires and they can never be peaceful. But if a devotee accepts whatever situation that Krishna has put in him as Krishna's arrangement, then he's peaceful. He can be peaceful. His mind can be undisturbed. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, how can there be any happiness if there's no peace? So, when a Vaishnava actually gains this insight and realization that by full remembrance and dependence upon the Lord, and with that, because he's situated in Krishna consciousness, and he understands the benefit of Krishna consciousness, he understands the benefit of giving it to others. And then with that mood of compassion, instead of thinking of his own suffering, he turns his attention to others who are suffering due to this one thing only, forgetfulness of Krishna. Then that's real Vaishnava. He turns his attention towards others. He's not concerned of his own, but he turns attention towards others and sees how others are suffering, but why are they suffering? One reason only. Prabhupada always emphasized this point. In the material world, everything, quoting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, everything is here. You can have everything, but what is lacking the most is Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada, although he underwent many inconveniences prior to his trip on the Jaladuta, difficulties, hardships, but he was Vyavasayatmaka buddhi. Vyavasayatmaka buddhi eke hakura nandana, as Krishna describes, the intelligence of those who are, one who is Vyavasayatmaka buddhi eke hakura nandana, resolute in purpose and their aim is one. Krishna says, they are resolute in purpose and their aim is one, but the intelligence of those is many branched. They cannot be so resolute in their determination. And then Krishna explains, I think it was the next, Bhogaishvaya prasaktanam taya parata chetasam vyavasayatmaka buddhi samadham navadhiyate. The minds of those who are too much attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence and who are bewildered by such things, then there can be no resolute determination to engage in devotional service. So Prabhupada was resolute. His aim was one, and his resolute determination is so very nicely described here, and his helpless and dependence on Krishna is so nicely described here in the song Markine Bhagavata Dharma. So let us read the translation. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me. I don't think the translation are in the book, so I have one translation here. So, but I guess you have some business here, otherwise why would you bring me to this terrible place? Someone would say, wait a minute. Prabhupada got on the Jaladuta. But he's saying, why would you bring me here? You must have some purpose for me. He said, Krishna put me here. Where did Prabhupada, and the interesting thing is, where did Prabhupada leave from before he went there? Well, he was in Vrindavan. He was in Vrindavan, and someone may think that Prabhupada had already undergone so many difficulties in his household life, and then after leaving family life, he went through so many difficulties in trying to establish Krishna consciousness in India, so many hardships. He was in poverty, had no money, he was living in the Radha Damodar temple, didn't even have enough rupees to pay for the rent. So he started publishing Back to Godhead magazine. He had to go out and he had to purchase the paper, and he wrote all the articles and printed them, and he would go to the printer, and sometimes the printer would say, but you haven't paid for the previous one, and Prabhupada was just preaching to him. He was resolute, and so many difficulties he had in establishing Krishna consciousness there. And then, he wasn't getting adequate help from his godbrothers. He approached different godbrothers and asked them to please help fulfill the desire of our Guru Maharaj. He wanted books published in the English-speaking language. Not now. He would tell him we have many other books we have to publish. Obstacle after obstacle. It's not that this wasn't a smooth sail. It's one obstacle after the next. So But still, he was thinking, when he finally got to America, and he left Vrindavan, a place where he could have, after all the difficulties, he could have just stayed in Vrindavan, engaged in bhajan, and his life would have been perfect. But he didn't consider that perfection because he had an order. And as far as he was concerned, that there was no question of perfecting his life without serving that order. And he considered that order was coming from spiritual master, coming from Krishna, and therefore he's thinking, Krishna, you brought me to this place. And it wasn't, you brought me to this wonderful place in America. Many people think they come to America, and this is a wonderful place. Papa didn't categorize it as, why did you bring me to this wonderful place? He said, why did you bring me to this terrible place? But you must have had a reason to bring me to this terrible place, as he's saying here. Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of ignorance and passion, absorbed in material life. They think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for transcendental message of Vasudeva. I do not know how they will be able to understand it. But I know your causeless mercy can make everything possible, because you are the most expert mystic. How will they understand the mellows of devotional service? Oh Lord, I'm simply praying for your mercy, so that I'll be able to convince them about your message. And Prabhupada was thinking, how is it possible these Westerners are going to understand such a detailed and difficult to understand subject matter about bhakti? Bhakti is, it's not perceivable, as we were talking about yesterday, how the Lord, doesn't see things from the external perspective. There is a transcendental relationship that exists between the devotee and the Lord that cannot be understood. It's a mystery to a non-devotee. Complete mystery. When they look at it, they may think, why would anybody voluntarily live in poverty? Why would anybody voluntarily accept inconveniences without any apparent material remuneration? That's a mystery to most people. They can't understand what motivates a person to accept austerity, live in poverty, no remuneration, voluntarily accept some inconvenience for apparently no external benefit whatsoever. A non-devotee who looks at that can't understand the kind of reciprocation the devotee is getting in his heart from Krishna. He thinks reciprocation means money in the bank account. But the Vaishnava thinks reciprocation is much greater wealth than that. Reciprocation is the peace we were talking about. The reciprocation that comes when Krishna is pleased by one's efforts, which is far greater than any pleasure of this material world. Pleasures of this material world have a beginning and end. Chapala sukha. What is that verse? Vipala sevana kripana durajana chapala sukha lavalagire. As Govinda Das describes. Serve wicked, miserly men for simply some temporary flickering happiness. He describes Govinda Das. So, so Prabhupada was saying, how will they understand the mellows of devotional service? He was thinking that it's not going to be by my effort. You can do it, but Krishna, but I'm depending on you. I can't. So he says that, oh Lord, I'm simply praying for your mercy so that I'll be able to convince them about your message. All living entities have become under the control of the illusory energy by your will, and therefore, if you like, by your will, they can also be released from the clutches of illusion. I wish, this is my favorite line. I wish that you may deliver them. Why was I say that? Because Prabhupada was actually talking about us. He's praying to Krishna. Here was pure Vaishnava whose heart is just filled with compassion for suffering souls, and who controls Krishna by his love, undoubtedly. Otherwise, how was Prabhupada even able to transform this planet in such a short period of time, and impact so many people's lives and change so many people, not only then, but even now? This is not something that just happened from 1965 to 1977. It's continuing. How people's lives are changing. In fact, one of the things I wanted to even read tonight, if I get to it, is I'll get to it. I'll tell you later. But Prabhupada was praying to Krishna, please deliver them. And we understand that, we gave the example last night, when a pure Vaishnava, he purchases Krishna with his love. And when somebody purchases Krishna, then because purchased him, and Krishna says, I belong to you because of your love, then if Krishna says, I belong to you, then that person has the prerogative to give him to somebody else, because he possesses Krishna. That's the power of his devotion. So he's praying, okay, Krishna. He's purchased Krishna. He said, you deliver them. Therefore, if you so desire their deliverance, then only will they be able to understand your message. The words of Srimad Bhagavatam are your incarnation, and if a sober person repeatedly receives it with submissive oral reception, then he will be able to understand your message. He will become liberated from the influence of the modes of ignorance and passion, and thus all inauspicious things accumulated in the core of the heart will disappear. Prabhupada is referring to Srinvata Svakata Krishna Ponyashavana Kirtana Vedantisto Yavadani Vinanoti Suritsata. As Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the super soul within the heart of every living being. He cleanses desire for material enjoyment from in the heart of that person who develops the urge to hear his message when properly heard and chanted. And Prabhupada is explaining that real purport of the Bhagavatam, that anybody who develops a desire to hear Krishna's message in Srimad Bhagavatam, then Krishna from within the heart will act in such a way to eradicate, to cleanse these obstacles on the path of devotional service from within the heart. He will become liberated from the influence of the modes of ignorance and passion, and thus all inauspicious things accumulated in the core of the heart will disappear. How will I make them understand this message of Krishna consciousness? I am very unfortunate, unqualified, and the most fallen. Therefore I am seeking your benediction so that I can convince them, for I am powerless to do so on my own. Somehow or other, O Lord, you have brought me here to speak about you. Now, my Lord, it is up to you to make me a success or a failure as you like. Prabhupada's prayer. Whatever you like. If you want to make me a success, then you can do it. If you want to make me a failure, that's what you want, then you do it. Sometimes we may wonder, how should we pray? We think, well, certainly I should pray for success, because it's for Krishna's pleasure. But Prabhupada said, no, whatever you want. If you want me to fail, then whatever you want. Of course, Prabhupada didn't fail. But all he wanted was Krishna's desire, Krishna's decision. So he said, you can make me a success or a failure as you like. O spiritual master of all the worlds, I can simply repeat your message. So if you like, you could make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Only by your causeless mercy will my words become pure. I'm sure that when this transcendental message penetrates their hearts, they will certainly feel engladdened and thus become liberated from all unhappy conditions of life. Oh Lord, I am just like a puppet in your hands. So if you brought me here to dance, then make me dance, oh Lord, make me dance as you like. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge. I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I have been designated as Bhaktivedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta. It doesn't have signed your insignificant paper. It's not here. It's a very important part. It just ends. You can fulfill the real purport of Bhaktivedanta, but actually underneath it says, sign your insignificant paper.
It's not part of the song.
It's not part of the song. No.